So inside your packet, there is a little handbook, and then there's our summer camp themes. We'll have some more like paperwork for you as we get a little bit closer, but this is what we have to start with. And just so you guys know, like why I'm even doing the training, last year was the first year I had not worked in a summer camp since 2008. So this is what I've done every summer. I've been an administrator, I've been just a regular counselor, and I love the fact that we're doing this camp here because as far as I know, this is the only faith-based day camp that goes all summer in Mansfield. And a lot of families look to this as a way to provide a safe place for their kids. And a lot of day camps, like I've worked locally in day camps, and it's likely that you're going to run into kids that are bringing some tough stuff with them. And here we have the tools to approach that, not just with love and good skills, but with Jesus. And it really can make a difference eternally in a kid's summer, or in a kid's life, just from the summer. So I'm excited that you guys are all here, and I just wanted to go over a few things to make sure that we're all on the same page for things this summer. So we want this to be a really high quality program. And so some of our expectations for you as you're part of this program are pretty simple. You need to be familiar with the schedule and what you're doing throughout the day. We try to keep things really consistent. You're going to find that especially with some kids, that's going to help a lot with their behaviors and just with making everything smoother. So know where you need to be when. You'll find that we're pretty flexible. Lucy is a very easy boss to work with. So if you've got an idea like, hey, let's do this today, she will probably roll with it. But make sure that you know like when you're supposed to be here, when you're supposed to be outside, or when you're supposed to be having lunch or snacks, so that those things can stay consistent. We do expect you to be prompt and reliable in your attendance. That means that if you are supposed to be here at noon, you are here at noon, not 12:15. That you don't leave early without checking and making plans for that, because if you've worked in like fast food or retail or another job that's a little bit more maybe flexible in their staffing than we are, they can kind of absorb somebody being absent. But here, if somebody is absent, then we're out of ratio, and we're literally at a point where we could like be in trouble and being in danger of being shut down. And it's putting the kids at risk ultimately. If the kids are not properly supervised, if somebody doesn't show up when they're supposed to, I don't know if you guys has anybody ever like worked with kids, like large groups of kids before? Like the more kids you have in a room, like the crazier it's going to be. So if somebody doesn't show up and we're not expecting it, and like we have no backup plan for it, all of a sudden there's like, we've gone from 5 kids in a room to 15 or 20, and like it's mass insanity, and it's not fair to the kids. So if for some reason you are concerned about like a time issue, like, oh my goodness, I am running late, like that needs to be communicated, but more importantly, you need to plan ahead that you are here on time. Like there's really no wiggle room for, like, we're flexible within the program, but we're not flexible on you not being here, if that makes sense. Is that good? Is that
Yes.
How to say that, Lucy? I know this is a hard issue for her.
This is a job. Sonia and I put our blood, sweat, and tears into this program. But also we want to have fun, and within the confines of what ODE says we can and cannot do. And we want to have fun. We want you to have fun with the kids, and we want to have a great summer. But it is a job. And if you're not here, then somebody's got to be with the kids.
Yeah. So like I've been in situations before where like somebody doesn't show up, and then like I have to stay all day. Or if like if I'm the morning shift, and so if I wasn't planning on that, like I didn't prepare, maybe I didn't bring a lunch, whatever, like that just puts a lot of stress on your coworkers, and then relationships start to break down. So just be really cognizant of that. We also expect that you'll be interactive with the campers. They are here to be loved on, and kids will eat up any attention you give them. We're going to have kids this year that are coming from really, really rough backgrounds. We have kids that are newly adopted, kids that are in foster care. Their parents have looked around at all of the options locally and said, this is where we want our kids. And they're entrusting us with this huge amount of trust that we're going to love on their kids and be aware of what's going on with them. So make sure that you're monitoring their behavior. Make sure that at any given point, if a staff member or a parent asks you a question about what's going on with their child, you know how to answer that. The numbers we have this year are not enormous. They're like, it's a good sized group, but it's not going to be overwhelming. And you'll be able to have a good relationship with those campers, but you need to be paying attention to what they're doing. And you also need to make sure that you're putting their needs first as representatives of Jesus. So sometimes the things that are appropriate to talk about with your high school friends or with your friends from college are not appropriate to talk about in front of kids. This is a very basic thing, but you would be shocked. Like some of the times that I've worked at day camps, like the conversations that we have had, or that I've had to stop between counselors has been like insane. Like, why would you have that conversation in front of a kid? But sometimes when you're with your friends, like you kind of forget that the kids can hear, or you think maybe they aren't paying attention, or maybe they don't understand what that word means. So just make sure that you're, every interaction you have, not just with the kids, but in front of the kids, is honoring to Jesus. Make sure that you're planning ahead, that you know what is on the schedule for tomorrow. Make sure that you're looking at your lesson plans. Be familiar with your lesson plans. Maybe you guys have taught from a lesson plan before. Is this new to anybody? Okay. So just make sure that you're prepared. There's nothing worse than like getting in there that day and then having to figure it out and realizing you don't have the stuff you need, or I don't know. And I'm bad at this because I teach like 8 classes a day, and so there are times when I'm making up my lesson plans like that morning. But as much as you can, like you'll have time within your day where you can be looking ahead and making sure you're prepared. Also remember that we are using other teachers' classrooms. This is probably one of the biggest issues that we face. We have very generous teachers that have opened their rooms to us, but I will tell you that anytime this is brought up in the teacher's lounge, they get a little pale, because a lot of the stuff in those rooms are purchased with their own money, and they're very protective of it. And the idea of something happening to the stuff in their room is like terrifying to them. So we have no custodial staff during the summer. We are the custodial staff. Before the end of the night, like make sure that the room is swept, that trash is taken out, make sure that everything is cleaned up and ready for the next day. And I will tell you that as kids get picked up, you'll have more and more free time to do that, so you can be cleaning up as the kids are getting ready to leave. But make sure that that's something that you're doing regularly and consistently, and be really, really vigilant in making sure the kids are not touching anything that does not belong to them. Lucy does a really good job of providing plenty of stuff for them to use, but just make sure that you're vigilant in protecting the other teacher's stuff. A few specific things. Lucy is in charge of checking kids in and out. Please do not let a kid go with a parent if you have not had them sign out through her. She needs to know what parent picked up a kid, when they were here for billing purposes, but also for safety purposes. Again, we're dealing with kids that may be in foster care, recently adopted, may have some really tough home situations. The kids that we will have, oftentimes, the reason that they need care is because there is kind of a tricky home situation. So make sure that you are being vigilant and just not letting kids go with anybody. If you have any questions, please get in touch with Lucy.
We do have one family in the toddler room that cannot. The dad is not allowed to see them. We have court orders, so he has supervised visits. So so if you want, I will let you know of those situations just in case. But yeah.
I will tell you, it's very easy to do. One time I had a parent, I was probably 19. I had a parent pick a kid up at the day camp I was working at. It was a parent we knew we knew it to be like dad in the situation. They picked up one of the 2 kids in the family and left. And then the mom showed up and said, who picked up my daughter? And we didn't know the guy's name. Somebody had let him go and it was familiar, so we just thought it was fine. And so it is awkward to have those conversations. If somebody comes up and they might even be a little scary, and you will probably not want to say oh, I need to see your ID, or oh, I need to check with Lucy, because there might be some conflict there. It is better to have conflict than to have a kid be hurt. So make sure that if you need backup on that, please call somebody else to help you. As far as supervision, make sure no kid is left unsupervised at any time. You need to know at any given point where a kid is. If you have the older group and they are in the bathroom, you need to know where they are. And you need to know what they're doing at all times. I cannot tell you the number of times that kids have done crazy stuff in the bathrooms during the school day here, that it's crazy. Just make sure that you know, and that if a kid is in the bathroom for too long, you are following up on that, or that you just keep an account in your head of all the kids at all times. Also make sure, and this is a hard thing to talk about because we don't like to think that it could happen here. Don't be alone with a kid. One of the stories I always tell when I do trainings like this is whenever you're interacting with a kid, you want to make sure that the interaction you're having with them is based on their needs and not yours, and that you are not getting like an ego boost from how the kid is treating you or anything like that. We want to make sure that you're protected, and that if, God forbid, there was an accusation against you, that we could say, these are the protocols we follow. This is what we do to keep the kids safe. This is what we do to keep our counselors safe. Because an accusation is devastating, and it will affect your career for the rest of your life. And that's a really hard thing to talk about. We don't like to think about it, but it does happen. I've worked at day camps where things were said by a kid, and it was in a supervised area, but because the counselor had not been safe in following protocols previously, we couldn't back them up and say they have a pattern of behaving safely. And that person was let go, and that went on their record, and it was a huge deal. Be aware, there's going to be times when you are like having to be one-on-one with a child. Make sure that you're communicating, that you've got like visibility. Make sure that you're not like in an enclosed area with a child for a long period of time. And make sure that if that were to happen, say a kid is injured and you need to walk them down to get an ice pack or something, make sure that your other kids are taken care of. Make sure somebody knows where you are. Make sure you come right back. Because of just the low numbers of staff that we have, we can't really make sure that we're like everybody's with people all the time with another adult, but make sure that you're minimizing the times when you're one-on-one. And make sure that you're not like, oh, I'm having a bad day, come here and give me a hug. Like, that should never be a thing. Like, and I don't think it would be with anybody here, but make sure that you're just putting up barriers and making sure that if anybody looked in on any of your interactions, they would be like, oh, that's really good, you guys are safe. Bathroom breaks, if you have the younger kids, you will need to go in and help them in the bathroom. Lucy was saying it is okay to line the kids up and have them wait while you help the kids potty. I'm used to the older ones, and so like to me that's a really weird thing. But you will need to make sure that the kids are being safe in the bathroom. You cannot just send preschoolers in to use the bathroom and assume they're going to be fine while you go use the bathroom down the hall. Like, that's not going to be okay. So make sure that like when kids are in there that you're there to help redress them. If you have questions about your age-specific group, please make sure you ask. There's going to be plenty of adults who have lots of experience with that. So just make sure that you're very willing to learn on it. Make sure for the school-age kids that they are not in there by themselves for an extended period of time. We have had peeing contests in the bathroom. We've had people that have flushed like whole rolls of toilet paper down the bathroom. Boys especially are inventive, but it's not just the boys. So if they're in there for a long period of time and you're like, I wonder what happened to little Johnny, you might want to go check, because
I think it's okay, even with those kids. Line the girls up. You stand there with the door open, and you stand in the doorway, and you say, okay, you three go and go to the bathroom, then you come out, then you three go in the bathroom, then have the boys line up, and then let the girls go in three at a time.
And I would never send the whole group in at a
Never.
time. Like, that's just a recipe for disaster. Minimize, you can send them in one at a time.
But with the littles in the kindergarten, first grade, even second grade, if you have some that are, if Sonia says, yeah, these kids kind of mess around, it's fine to stand in the doorway with the door open, and you say, well, this is just how we do
The
it.
stalls have doors, they can
Yes.
go in and be private, like it's not a problem. I have more than once walked into the boys' bathroom and said, hey, what's going on right now?
Now, the 5th and 6th graders, you can send them in, unless,
Unless
if-
there's-
yes, but the littler ones, I think it's perfectly fine to stand in the doorway.
So just make sure that like you're aware of that. If you do need a bathroom break, you need to let a staff member know that your kids need watched. Don't just like leave the room unattended with a bunch of kids in there. We have 2 snacks during the day and a meal. A lot of times we will be able to provide snacks for them. I think there are times when they'll have a snack that they've brought. Make sure they're staying in their seat while they're eating. They're not up wandering, so that way the food kind of stays in one spot. It's a lot easier to clean up. And that way if there is a kid with an allergy issue, we're not kind of wandering around exposing them to that thing. They're also not allowed to share food for that reason. Pray before you eat. The older group, I have a prayer that I do with them. I can teach you guys if you want to know it. But that's just kind of an important part of like starting the meal. Use mealtime as a time to get to know your campers. Don't be afraid to have conversations with them, ask questions. I've got like a little box of question cards if you need to like come up with stuff to talk about. Make sure that, especially with the older kids, you're having them clean up and helping them to be responsible. It's a lot of time to learn life skills. You should also pack a lunch. First time I worked at a camp, nobody told me that, and I was like, oh, this is fun. I had nothing to eat the first day. Pack a lunch, pack an ice pack if you think it'll be a long time. There is a fridge in the toddler room. Make sure you bring your own water. There are places to refill the water during the day, but make sure that you're responsible to bring that. Please do not use your phone for any personal use during the camp day. I would recommend setting a ringtone for every staff member, or maybe a separate one for Lucy, so that if you hear that ringtone, keep your ringer on like an old person, like me. And if you hear that ringtone that you know is the camp ringtone, go ahead and answer it. Anything else, just ignore it. It'll be there at the end of the day. And the reason for that is that when you are looking at a screen, you're not looking at the kids. And that says to the kids that the screen is more important than the kid is. And that's devastating to a kid. We've got kids that's what they've been being told their whole life. And if you set a standard that they are more important than your phone, it's massive. Like, you will see an amazing result in those kids. Also, please do not post pictures on social media of any of the campers. We have kids that are not allowed to have their pictures shared. It would be a violation of like foster care guidelines, things like that, and it's for their safety. Or if a parent says, I want my kid here, I just don't want their pictures online, we have to respect that. If you do capture a picture, send it to Lucy. Lucy's in charge of our social media stuff. She can share it. And I would encourage you, if you have a great moment at camp, you can take your phone out and take a picture. Those pictures turn out great, and it's great for publicizing the camp for future years, but just be really aware of that.
You just have to make sure you take a picture of a kid. If we're sending the parent, it doesn't have all the other kids in the...
Right.
So I crop them out and just send the picture of the child there.
So if it's a kid on the slide, like, try just to get the kid, not the 18 kids waiting to go down behind them. We will be doing field trips this year. Hallelujah. That was we don't know if we're going to be able to do this. If you are monitoring a field trip, and this is going to be primarily the older groups, make sure that you are taking attendance wherever you stop, getting on the bus, getting off the bus, getting back on the bus, getting off the bus. Make sure you know where your kids are. Carrying emergency medical forms. Make sure that the kids have their belongings. Have we heard about the pool yet?
I got a call.
Okay, that's okay. The last camp that we did, we were not able to operate last year, but 2 years ago, we went to the Woodland Pool, which was really, really fun, but you would not believe the number of things that kids will lose at the pool. So just make sure that you're like really on top of that. And because it's off-site, there's just an added level of supervision needed. Make sure you're really paying attention to those kids. It's not the time to like sit and chat with your friend that you saw at the pool. I was guilty of that a couple of times because I knew people at the pool and I was like, hey, how are you doing? And then I would look up and like this little kid's like on the edge of the diving board and he's freaking out. So like, just be aware of what your kids are doing. Also, you're in charge of making sure you get back to the bus on time and making sure you have a way to contact the bus driver. Probably the most senior person on the trip would be the person doing that, but so probably me. But if for some reason I am not there and somebody else is in charge of the field trip, the bus driver a lot of times will not stay for the whole time. They'll kind of go do something else and come back. So it's important to have their number so you can get in touch with them. And make sure you talk to the kids about being on a bus. A lot of our kids have never been on a bus and they will be like wild. So like make sure they know to stay seated because they may not know to do that. There's no seatbelt, so in their head it's okay to wander. We do outdoor play. So as long as the weather is nice, we will be out on the playground. Make sure that they are not engaging in dangerous behavior. When we talked about nosebleeds, I had to laugh because there was a little boy that smuggled a dinosaur toy out to the playground last year or 2 years ago and launched it in the air and didn't think that it might hit somebody in the face, and it hit a little boy in the nose and he started bleeding everywhere. So like make sure that they are being wise on the playground. Make sure you're monitoring what they're bringing out. If they're smuggling stuff under their clothes, it happens. Kids should be one at a time on the slide. They should not be doing anything dangerous on the monkey bars. And the rules will be different for the different grades, so it would be good to come up with whatever group of people you're working with. You say you're working with preschool and kindergarten, make sure that as a rule or as a group you have consistent rules. So if the morning rule is we don't walk up the slide, that has to be the afternoon rule too. Or if it's, yeah, that's a, yes, and that is the rule. Do not walk up the slide. One person at a time on the slide. I will tell you that anytime I've gone to yell at a kid for doing that, immediately as I'm opening my mouth, they've gotten hurt. So like, playground's just crazy dangerous. Be really aware. Also make sure that any school equipment that you use is put away. I know this has been like Mrs. Wyszynski's just her thing this year. It's been so frustrating for her. The ball cart gets left out because somebody thinks somebody else is using it after them. Or another group comes out and didn't know they were supposed to put it back. If you use anything that belongs to the school, we are absolutely responsible to make sure it gets put away. You also need to be aware that occasionally people will come onto the playground that are not from the school. I don't know, did you have any thoughts on letting the kids, if people come in, do we need to tell them to leave if our kids are out there?
I don't, unless they're being...
Okay. Occasionally other, families are coming to soccer practice. Yeah. Once or twice we had people that came in. I would just say kind of keep the kids from interacting too much because it might be an uncomfortable situation, and those kids aren't under our supervision, so you don't want to be in a place where you're having to deal with a behavior issue. Occasionally you will come across bad behavior, and I would encourage each age band group to come up with, this is how we're going to deal with the behavior, and have that be consistent. You are going to have kids that are coming from very, very different backgrounds. You're going to have kids that come from safe and loving homes, and they know all about timeouts, and they know all about consequences that are good and consistent. And you are going to have other kids that have never had discipline in their life because they bounced from foster home to foster home to foster home. And this is the first place where they've truly been given solid guidelines. And so those kids are going to interact very differently. Part of being a good counselor is knowing the difference between those things. So what I would recommend is that there is a clear escalation in your consequences, so that you give the kids warnings, you give them grace, and you talk to them about, this is why this is not okay. So not just, don't stand on the table, but, what will happen if you stand on the table, so that they're starting to think about that. There are kids that will not think about those things. You also are okay giving consequences. Obviously, do not physically harm a child. But you can make them sit out. You can take away a privilege. You can say, I'm sorry, but you need to go take a break from this activity. We have things that we can use to help them calm down. You can go color. You can go play with this toy for a minute. Sorry, I thought that was my necklace. That's the microphone. So there's lots of things that we can do to kind of de-escalate that situation. I really recommend for kids coming from tough backgrounds, have them redo the action. If they're running down the hall, have them go back and practice walking. So that they kind of it retrains their brain that that's the right thing to do. Make sure that if you have a kid having a rough morning and you are the morning person in a group that's got a staff split, make sure that you talk to the person taking over for you afterwards so that they know, hey, Johnny threw 3 toys at people today, and he definitely ran over little Sally, and we've had him sit in timeout twice, and he's still not getting better, so you need to be aware of this. If you come in and you think little Johnny's been having a great day and he starts acting crazy, then you're going to be wondering why, and everybody will be like, well, he's been doing this, but it becomes a thing. So make sure that you're communicating, and make sure that if you are the afternoon person that you come in 2 or 3 minutes early so that you can get that update from the person that needs to leave. Use wisdom to communicate with parents how the day went. If Lucy is the only person talking to the parents, Lucy probably needs to know, hey, they were rough today. We did have some cases last year where we had to have some serious conversations with parents, some really serious conversations. Because a lot of times this is not as structured as the school day. So we see behaviors that you wouldn't see from that kid in the classroom. It was wild seeing the difference between a kid in my art room and the kid at camp because they just interacted very differently. So be aware that with the freedom of being here, you will probably see some very different things.
But we try to tell the parents too when they're doing something good.
Yes, yes. It's not only, we never talk to them just because their kid is having a rough day. Brag on the kids like crazy. It is such this is a cool program. Yes. Yeah.
Better behavior.
Yes.
From them.
And that really, like, that builds the trust with the family. And again, many campers will come from a family situation where they've not experienced good discipline before. They've not kind of seen that from a godly perspective of, like, you make a mistake, but you can work through it and you can learn from it and you can be better. So make sure that you are really consistent in your discipline. One thing that I've learned is that you never want to, like, yell at a kid for minutes at a time. Like, you want to tell them this was wrong, this is what's going to happen because it was the bad choice, and then you move on. And that, like, you don't hang it over the kid's head for minutes and hours and whatever. And so make sure that you're kind of restoring them to being a healthy and whole kid. That's a really important thing that we're able to do here. Pray with the kids. If you have a kid that's struggling with a behavior issue, like, they are lying just, like, every day, pray with them about, I had this happen last summer. I babysat a kid and he, like, was messing with his sister and wouldn't calm down, having a full meltdown, and we prayed about it, and, like, the behavior stopped. Like, that was the craziest thing I've ever seen. Like, he went from being, like, rigid sobbing to, like, oh, okay, I'm gonna go apologize to my sister now, like, because he prayed about it. So, like, don't discount the power of Jesus and what we're doing here. We talked about this a little bit. If you have a brilliant idea for an activity, you have the freedom to do that. Just make sure that you're communicating it to the other people on your team. And if you need something, talk to Lucy first. Don't just assume, like, hey, I need, like, $50 worth of equipment tomorrow. Can we make that happen? Like, that probably will be a no.
No.
Big no. We are on a shoestring budget, so we're very creative with the supplies that we have. If you have an emergency, there are procedures for fire and tornado posted in the classrooms. Make sure you do have your phone on you so that you can reach out in an emergency. If there is an emergency, use your training that you just got today, use your common sense, and communicate with the rest of us that we would need help. Do not try to handle something on your own. The time that we had the little kid with the really bad nosebleed, a parent walked in just at that moment, and I was able to, because we were on the playground and, like, it was really a long walk to go get the stuff. We kind of had to 10 yards and punt while I'm signing this kid out, and there will be times when you're going to have to really use your resources, so make sure that you're thinking through that. I didn't write anything in for these last two, so if you want to take notes, if you get sick,
Don't get sick.
Yeah, don't get sick. You're not sick. You're fine. We understand that there are going to be times when you truly are too sick to be here. However, it is really hard when you're not here. So if you are able to make it through, if you are, this is going to be maybe too much. I had a girl once that, like, didn't come to work because she had cramps. And ladies, I got the really good cramp medicine if you need it. But know that if you are taking time off, that's going to put a huge burden on other people. So make sure that really, truly is a situation where you cannot be here, like, I am puking my guts out and whatever. Like, that's a little different from, like, you know, I have cramps. And we'll work through, I mean, like, any teacher has had, you know, the works. And you will get a strong immune system working with kids. You will probably get the sniffles. You will probably get colds. Take vitamin C. Make sure that you're doing everything you can to boost your immune system. But if it is something minor, do your best, especially if you're working a shorter shift, do your best to be here. And make sure that you're taking the preparations. Like, if you can't be here, make sure that you are still communicating, hey, this is what needs done. Whoever's subbing for you, make sure they've got the ability to do the lesson, things like that, so that they're not 10 yards and punting. Just be really, really aware of the fact that if you're not here, it leaves a huge hole that has to be filled by a lot of panicking. And lastly, how should I represent the camp to the community? MCS is a wonderful place. I love working here, but it is a fishbowl. And so if you are sharing something that happened with camp with a friend, but their friend's parent is also, like, it's a friend from school, and they've got a little sibling, now all of a sudden rumors about a kid are floating around the school, and it causes problems. Make sure that whatever you are sharing, and I don't want this to sound like, oh, don't say anything bad because we have to maintain our image. It's really about protecting the kids. Legally, we're not really allowed to share stuff that the kids are doing, especially negative things. So it's one thing to say, I had a student who did this, but if we're naming names and we're saying like, and they had this disability, and like that stuff is not okay. Medical conditions, academic ability, anything like that, full names, let's not be sharing those. So if you need to like, I don't know, like just be really, really aware of it. It is fine to have conversations within other staff members of like, hey, I'm having problems with this kid and they're doing this and I don't know how to solve it, but make sure that even your conversations with your coworkers are positive and uplifting, and that if you're complaining about a situation, it's not really like, complaining is not going to be helpful. Asking for help, saying, hey, have you experienced this, that's going to be very, very different. So just kind of be aware of how you're representing things within the community. And I did want to kind of finish up with one last thing. I wanted to tell you guys a quick story about what happened last year and why I think this is important. I am all for changing up your lessons, because last year we were doing a lesson about the plagues, and we had, 2 years ago, we were doing a lesson about the plagues, and we talked about the death of the firstborn son, which is a really hard lesson. Most of the kids in that group were 7 years old, and they were not church kids. They were kids that were here because we had a good program and because we had had spots, and a lot of places that year were full. And so they didn't necessarily have a good grasp of the Word of God. And so we were talking about the death of the firstborn son, and I said, do you guys know like what this ties into like later on in the Bible? And nobody knew. So we talked about this like, this is Jesus, like this is showing what's going to happen with Jesus. 4 kids in that group got saved that day. And like, when kids get saved, sometimes they're like, I said it because I felt like it was what I was supposed to do, but I'm not really sure. But like that summer, it was crazy because you could see a difference in the way those kids behaved the rest of the summer. And they started growing, and they were praying for each other, and they were like memorizing Bible verses and stories and asking questions, and they were growing and changing. You have the ability to change a kid's life forever, or being part of letting God do that. So the job that you're doing here is massively, massively important. And I want to really encourage you that you come in prayed up. That when you have a kid that you are struggling with, that you pray over them, and that you are asking God to give you a heart to love them, because He will, and He will change that kid through you. Like, it's the coolest thing if you actually like do this as a ministry rather than just as a job. So you'll see kids change this summer. There will be times it'll be really tough, but there's going to be times when it's amazingly awesome. Lucy?
One more thing. You guys do not have to do the lesson. I mean, we'll do the lessons and we'll have stuff already, so don't think you have to do everything from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
But if you see, oh, this lesson, and oh, I remember we did this at church camp, and I have a great craft to go with that, great, do that, because you're excited about it, you do that. Sonia might say, we did this at this camp, and I want to do this, and that's okay. But they're all going to be doing the same, kind of the same thing, but it'll trickle down a little simplified versus on the age group.
Yeah.
So obviously the older kids are going to do things a little bit more complicated, maybe a little bit more messy, whereas toddlers, Lucy don't like messy stuff, we ain't doing paint. But, you know, if you guys want to do paint this summer, you go for it. You can do kindergarten and you want to do paint and you want to do Play-Doh and you want to do messy stuff that go with the lesson, that's great, do that. I'm just saying, don't think you have to do everything from scratch, because you don't. We have the things that we did 2 years ago. We've got a 3-ring binder. It's got everything in it.
So your lesson plans are already made, but we want to give you guys the creativity. If you have something else that you want to add, you see the opening, like to go deeper or take it a different direction that seems to really fit your group, you have the
Or if the kids are
freedom to
really
do that.
into this,
Mm-hmm.
and you want to do that the next day instead of whatever, that's great, do that.
They played tornadoes every day after lunch for like 3 weeks last year. Like, that was just what they did. It's a bunch of second graders pretending they were tornadoes. So like you'll have like groups that are just into stuff, and it's
Or
okay
if they're
to
into whatever lesson and they want to learn more about this, do that the next day too. Extend it out. That's fine.
Yeah.
We're not so rigid that, oh, you have to follow. You have a little bit more creativity as to what you want to do. If you think the kids are really into it or they really want to learn about it, go with it.
What I would really just encourage is that you don't just let them free play for the entire time you're with them, because they do need structure and they do need to learn how to get along with each other. One of the biggest things that they're going to learn here is social skills, they get academics all year. We're not really looking for them to be doing like tutoring or anything like that over the summer, but they do need to learn how to get along with each other and how to follow Jesus better. This is a great place for that to happen.
And we had several kids 2 years ago that really,
They grew.
really,
It's crazy. It was very, very cool.
for the first year, 28 kids.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
So I know it's late. You guys have been here for a while. We are excited to have all of you. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask.